We are talking about biodiversity today, but much more than that, a partnership on the subject.
This partnership and its potential success. Yeah, now we have 160 registered members from 150 organizations from all over the world, and it covers a farmer in Kenya to a global research institute. So it kind of, the plurality is definitely there. All actors almost have a role to play here. It's not just for one actor. Biodiversity is for all of us to enjoy and to help feed us. It's the farmer deciding what to grow and how. It's the value chain actors who decide what can be transported and how we organize that system to incorporate biodiversity and diversity on our plates as well for consumers. Like, what do you actually consume? But also the policymakers, what kind of enabling environment do you set for diversity to thrive? I really think it's kind of, biodiversity connects us all. It's not staying within a single country or a plot of land, you know, it's something that is shared with everybody. So therefore also we all should feel responsibility and an ability to act to promote that.
Yeah. For example, agroecology, or kind of we need to feed the world, as kind of different narratives. But then you also see the blind spots, and we did a dialogue in our community, and they all professionally they kind of they map themselves to very different narratives. So we have people from all the different narratives, and then also the disconnect between how they map themselves professionally and how they map themselves personally, where many of them, for example, see much more connection to a more than human kind of narrative, but professionally that's still less accepted or less, because it's much more emotional also. So it's I'm going off a little bit here, but it's just fascinating.
What are we looking forward to?
Hello and welcome to the Beehive, the program that focuses on the projects, the partnerships, and above all the people at the Netherlands Food Partnership. I'm your host, Mark Fonseca Rendeiro, and we are talking about biodiversity today, but much more than that, a partnership on the subject. And of course, to do so, I need the help of special guests. So today on the program, we welcome Marielle Karsenberg, a partnership builder at NFP, and also Rosaline Reemans, the director of Global Learning. That doesn't say NFP at the end, but we'll talk about that in a second. But thanks for joining me. You're our first two-guest program. So very brave of you both, and I think also even more fun to have two voices to hear from. The subject, as I mentioned, is biodiversity, but specifically a partnership that you're both instrumental in leading. But let's talk about the issue first, because I always figure there are people that run into these clips the way the internet works, and they may be initially issue focused. And biodiversity is one of those topics that, depending on where you work, what you do, you might run into it, right? But for those that don't know it, I don't know, what's your entry point? And maybe this could be personal even, to what you knew about biodiversity, or what role biodiversity played in your life before the partnership. And then we'll get into that partnership.
Right. I'm happy to kickstart that off. Is that okay? I'll go back to my childhood even then, if you were asking me where this starts from. I learned about biodiversity from my dad, who is a fanatic bird watcher and collects plants to press and safeguard, kind of, in his own collection. And I usually thought it was quite annoying, because we would go on hikes in the mountains, and every 3 minutes it would be a stop, this bird or that bird. And I just wanted to get to the top of the mountain. So we usually had this agreement. Whenever I'm fed up with that, he will ignore the birds and we just keep walking. But then a bit later in life, I joined a collectively owned community farm. It's an organic farm, but definitely in a transition from traditional agriculture, its previous use, to now more organic, circular farming, producing my own food and being involved in that, and making much more the connection between the need of biodiversity and food production. So that was actually the first time that it really facilitated that link for me.
Yeah.
And really triggered my interest in better understanding why we need biodiversity to ensure that we have our foods on the plate that can feed as well.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Very personal. Yeah.
Yeah. Taking it back.
Rosalie?
Yeah, great. Thanks. And in a way, I could also go back to childhood, but I'll start a little bit later. But I think as children, we all have certain good memories of biodiversity in our environment. I see it with my own kids, like playing in the mud and seeing kind of things that I don't see anymore sometimes. Yeah. But I think my professional journey in this, I'm a bioengineer by background, so maybe also not so evident to run into this, but I was studying connections between agriculture and human health, actually. And when you look at it from this kind of systems perspective, you almost really end up on biodiversity as kind of really foundational to our food systems and how agriculture links to health and as well as to our human well-being. And that's how in my professional career, I ended up studying and using biodiversity really as an entry point for in systems approaches and how to look at the world differently, actually.
Yeah. I always think of it, and I would like you both or to correct me as often as possible, but when it comes to biodiversity, I don't know if everybody, just from the term, has any immediate connection the way you both do. I think of just, okay, a diversity in if we're talking about food and crops, the types of, let's say, crops that we grow. So if you only do one in mass, that has eventually a negative effect on our ability to just grow food. So that's how I think of it, and because I'm dealing with images a lot, I also think of pictures where there's different kinds of flowers next to each other and not the same one, whether it's flowers or food crops. This is where my mind goes, but I don't know if everybody automatically has these connections. So that's why I wanted to mention it. But is my association on point? And then we'll get into like where we are in the world. But yeah.
Just to make sure that we kind of have a similar understanding of biodiversity. Biodiversity is the diversity within specific species, so kind of the genetic diversity, but also indeed the different types of plants and animals that can coexist with each other, and then the ecosystems that they are a part of. And all these three levels are important for our food systems.
Yeah. Yeah, so you need biodiversity to sort of have all the things that we need as humans. But so then we arrive at where are we in the world? And of course there are variations, but are we at a point, or have we been the last generations where we've kind of lost biodiversity along the way? How are we doing world-wise?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at a lot of the statistics, you see biodiversity declining worldwide at concerning speed. And it's not just the wild biodiversity, it's also the biodiversity in our food systems that we eat. So the agrobiodiversity and the biodiversity that our food systems are directly dependent on, but they are all very much interconnected with each other. So the wild biodiversity is very connected also to the biodiversity in our agricultural landscapes. There is a direct interdependence between them, and we are losing biodiversity across all levels. Mm-hmm. But there's also a lot of hopefulness if people work on biodiversity and think about biodiversity, because you see you can restore it, and it's at local scale, and then also benefit from it at local scale as well as at larger scale. There are also examples where biodiversity is increasing again. But at the global picture, it's very bleak, and we have made kind of many global commitments to bend that curve, but it's not yet really bending. And there's where there's a lot of call for deeper transformative change, like how we connect with biodiversity and how we work with nature and with biodiversity. And I think there is where where has also been kind of a trend of a disconnection from nature and a domination of nature. Kind of, we need to control nature. We need to, but it has also created a disconnect from nature, and that is one of the deeper underlying causes that has been identified as a big underlying cause for biodiversity loss. And if we can connect again more with nature, with biodiversity, as individuals, as well as communities and as larger international organizations, that connection, I think, brings people a lot of hope. There is also increasing scientific evidence that it's possible and that it has multiple benefits for people and nature in synergy, and that brings more balance in the system.
Sticking with my ability to ask very elementary questions, who are the players that have power? The stakeholders, let's say, I often say players, that have power in this whole question of, okay, then how to restore biodiversity, or who leads the way?
It's a good question. I think it's really plural, actually, and all actors almost have a role to play here. It's not just for one actor. Biodiversity is for all of us to enjoy, and to help feed us. It's the farmer deciding what to grow and how. It's the value chain actors who decide what can be transported and how we organize that system to incorporate biodiversity and diversity on our plates as well for consumers. Like, what do you actually consume? But also the policymakers, what kind of enabling environment do you set for diversity to thrive? I really think it's kind of, biodiversity connects us all. It's not staying within a single country or a plot of land, it's something that is shared with everybody. So therefore also we all should feel responsibility and an ability to act to promote that. Yeah.
I guess it's also one of, like so many issues, but that it doesn't come down to just one country taking an initiative and saying, we're really focused on restoring biodiversity, because going it alone in this world just doesn't work, right? We're so interconnected. So it's not something even that just policymakers in just the Netherlands, for example, can cause to get better on their own. Would that be correct? I mean,
yeah, but also not, I think, neglecting the responsibility that we have. At the Netherlands Food Partnership, we are quite focused on the low and middle income country context, but not shying away from also understanding that in the Netherlands we have, with our current food systems and how we organize ourselves, a huge impact on our own biodiversity as well. So it shouldn't shy away, that complexity shouldn't shy away from also taking effective steps now.
And I think that's also where the role of partnerships comes in, right? Like we all have a responsibility in it, and we all have kind of a stake in it as well, but we cannot do it alone. And it's particularly, I think, for biodiversity, so evident, and that's where we also see demand from partners to come together between the public sector, the private sector, research and civil society, and to see we all have a role in this to play, but we need to kind of better understand who can do what, who is maybe blocking what, and how to overcome these blockages, and how to better work together in that. And there sometimes there's a lot of I would say enthusiasm of partners and agency of partners to better work together, but there's also complexity in it, and it's not always clear who exactly can do what, and what how kind of deep the genuine interests are to really make a deeper change.
I mean, this leads in many ways to the partnership itself, which is also kind of interesting because, some partnerships have existed longer than others here at NFP. And you're in my eyes, a unique position. I've been watching as it progresses. So let's talk about it. It has the specific title of Bridging biodiversity? Am I missing a term? Bridging?
The NFP Connects page
Yes.
does.
Oh,
It's all about
okay.
linking that. Officially, I think it's called the Netherlands Food Partnership on Biodiversity and Food Systems or something.
I was just curious why the term bridging was appropriate. I thought, oh, that's inspiring.
I think part of that is reflecting on Netherlands Food Partnership as a starting point as well. We're all talking about sustainable food systems. I think it's front and central in a lot of the work that we do and how we communicate also externally about our vision of what our food system should look like. But when I started kind of delving into the biodiversity topic, I didn't see biodiversity reflected in that as much. It kind of seemed like a world apart that we still needed to bridge and to better understand where those linkages are and how we can better find each other, communicate and share a language together, but also really understand how we can actually complement and collaborate more. So it's kind of building that bridge from, and there are definitely already bridges out there. It's not that they don't exist and we're starting from scratch. It's kind of how can we expand that
So in the start of the partnership, at what point does Ro get involved? How did this happen?
Going back in time, because I think now it's just like almost like late 2023, early 24, we were involved with a study that was being conducted by the Wageningen University and Research on how to include biodiversity within foreign trade and development cooperation policies. It was kind of a smaller knowledge research-based assignment that I was overseeing because it was part of the NFP budget. And kind of tiptoeing into the biodiversity topic for me. At the same time, PBL, the Netherlands Environmental Assessment Agency, was also working on a study on mainstreaming biodiversity within development cooperation. So that kind of came together and was the starting point. Was like, people are working on this, partners are involved in this. There's definitely an eagerness of learning and getting insights on the table with the policymakers in the Netherlands at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So I thought, is this something that the Netherlands Food Partnership should actually do something more with? Also understanding already kind of seeing that bridge missing between the biodiversity space and then our own work on sustainable food systems. So in follow-up of those activities, I really started just talking with as many partners I could find interested to having that conversation with me and really listening to how they engage with biodiversity or food systems, vice versa, and better understanding how they're working on this, but also what bottlenecks they are facing and what they could see as a potential role for the Netherlands Food Partnership to play. So that was kind of the starting point. And I think from those conversations, it was quite clear that the Netherlands Food Partnership has a role to play here and that partners would value our contribution in that space and bringing those networks closer together and facilitating that shared collaboration. But then to actually build that into a concrete working agenda is something else. Okay. And I saw that I don't have a biodiversity background myself. I'm more from the food system space. So to get somebody on board that would really be fundamental in bringing that knowledge there, but also understanding the role that we play, kind of the partnership building, co-creation space was important. I put out the terms of reference for that. And Ro was one of the people that responded. And I was very excited about that.
Yeah. And your mindset at the time, what you were looking for?
It was fascinating when, somebody flagged it to me actually. And for me, it's really two passions that came together because on one hand, it's biodiversity where I have a kind of scientific background, research and on biodiversity in food systems. The other one is I think that you don't always find spaces where there's really deep attention to how to build partnerships and in creating space to do that in a way that really provides attention to that. Like let's build stronger partnerships. And I think that from the Netherlands Food Partnerships really attracted me. It was that combination that we were doing also with critical learning to go deeper into the co-creation and collaborative learning from the other, and listening with a really open mind. And my biodiversity background, where I saw that in biodiversity, it's really needed to have that space for building stronger partnerships, because it's very easy to come in with your own agenda and polarizing or kind of contributing to some of the polarization that also happens in that space, where you have kind of biodiversity on one hand and food systems on the other hand, that is can be kind of the bad guy impacting on biodiversity only in a negative way, while there are also so many positive stories of food systems and biodiversity and how they interact with each other. So I see the way the Netherlands Food Partnerships approaches partnerships really provides the space to bring very different partners together that don't always have the same vision on things, but that pluralism is really important also in this space, and to deal with biodiversity and food systems, acting more on the opportunities to make these linkages stronger and more positive rather than negative, and breaking that vicious circle a bit.
Yeah.
Biodiversity is under great threat, both worldwide and here in the Netherlands. Species are disappearing at an alarming rate, ecosystems are degrading, and the consequences do not only harm our natural environment, but also our health, food security and economy.
We find ourselves, I think, in really unprecedented pressure on our natural resources.
The conservation and restoration of biodiversity is a complex challenge that affects the whole of society, and that's why we need a whole of society approach. IPBES is therefore very useful and valuable because it provides insights into the necessary action to bend the curve on the biodiversity loss.
We are very happy that you're all here today, and also, of course, online, that you can join, because it's very important, I think, that government officials, civil society, companies, knowledge institutions, that we come together to discuss and to reach a shared commitment to solving these global challenges.
Our mission is to strengthen knowledge foundations for better policy through science for the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, long-term human well-being and sustainable development.
We do need bold steps, and I think the transformative change will also highlight that, but we also have to support the small steps and hope that these will also build momentum.
My message to be more present online, to include more youth, will change the IPBES 12th session to include more youth, to actually go to the plenary, to see what's going on. And I think a lot of numbers that are shocking to people. I think shocking is the only way to make change right now, because we're living in such a dopamine world. You don't understand the scale of what's going on.
Often reports, they get put out and then it ends. Here's the report, take it and do with it what you will. But the kind of co-creative element after the report is published, I've seen some sparks of that here, but how do we continue? And how does it actually create the kind of just and equitable future we want?
IPBES also is very proud of its process for working with indigenous and local knowledge. And over the years, IPBES has invested a lot of work in developing processes for working with indigenous and local knowledge in IPBES assessments.
In this room, we agree on what we should be doing, and how can we ensure that we take this outside of this room? How can we ensure that we embody the messages that we go home with?
A transformative change for a just and sustainable world is possible to happen while addressing the underlying causes of biodiversity loss, achieves positives and measurable results for people and the planet. Everyone has a role to play in transformative change, with a leading role for governments in the making.
Thank you for sticking with us all the way through this morning.
And so there was this initial phase. You were noticing that this could be and should be a partnership. You came on board, but it's still very early, right, in the life cycle of this partnership. I mean, at some point you even have, I think, a model, a membership model. Tell me a little bit about it. I'm also looking a little bit about how it might be different from what I might have seen before, but yeah.
Yeah, I think after Ro came on board, we kind of started to consolidate the input that we already received from partners and drafting a work plan, an idea of what this partnership could look like. And in the end of that year, we tested that with, I think, about 20 partners. We really just shared the draft work plan and think with us, is this what you need?
Very open. Yeah.
Is that really what you meant when we had the previous conversations? And does it answer to some of the questions you have and the role NFP could play? And that work plan was, I think, very positively received, and it's kind of focusing on 4 outcomes. The first was to actually have that membership model in place. What could that look like? How do people join the partnership? How can they contribute?
Yeah.
So that's something we started building, and led to a model where you can kind of enter through 3 different levels. You have the supportive members. You come more to listen and to learn and to kind of hear what's going on, but we don't ask much else from these partners that are involved. We have the collaborative partners. We ask a bit more of them, like, could you join a panel once in a while? Or if you want to share something, would you mind sharing your experiences and think with us? And then the 3rd level is the strategic partners. And for those partners, we really do ask, help us to shape and strengthen this partnership and agenda. Bring your ideas to the table. Be sharp, question us on what we're doing, and really feel that you're part of this partnership and its potential success, kind of. Now we have 160 registered members from 150 organizations from all over the world. And it covers a farmer in Kenya to a global research institute. So it kind of, the plurality is definitely there, coming together. And it's nice that we get to facilitate that and to also see that actually quite a lot of partners, I think 40%, correct me if I'm wrong, registered as a strategic member. So I think there's
that's also interesting where they chose.
Where do partners, because we asked them to define that for themselves, and there's no check if that's really true. You know, that's not, it's more the intention that's behind it that we find important. And to see so many of the partners saying, I really want to help shape this agenda and think along and come with ideas and build this with you, I think is very powerful in understanding that the need is really there and the energy is also there with partners to help. And one thing that we definitely saw coming from the partners is we really want to share what we're already doing. Because it's not something, by linking biodiversity and food system, it's not something that happens in the future. It's already part of what partners are engaging in now, and there's a huge potential to get those learnings further shared and taken up by different actors and sharing the understanding of what they're doing. So one of the things we've been working on this year is a bundle of use cases, working with partners in the partnership to really delve into their practices, their activities, and understanding how they are already working on that interface of biodiversity and food systems.
Yeah, it reminds me to some extent what you were talking about with, obviously there are problems and we can talk about that, but there's also positive stories. And with the use cases, I mean, each of them seem to be a story. And from that story, I mean, there's inspiration, maybe practical lessons. Yeah,
I think a lot of times we also get the question, I get it. I see that biodiversity and food systems are so interdependent. It's kind of the foundation of it. But how to actually act on it, how to work with it in practice. And I think these journeys from the use cases are indeed journeys, because it's not always so straightforward, you know, like, okay, but it's journeys of different initiatives with very different entry points of how in practice, in reality, they have really been creating more synergies between biodiversity and food security or other food systems outcomes, and how to do it in practice. And this goes across very different scales. So we have landscape approaches, but also international approaches like business coalitions that work across scales. Also from policy examples to like farm communities or school meal programs. So it's really a diversity of entry points with which we hope to inspire and triggers others also that say, we can also do further work in practice and in strengthening how biodiversity and food work together.
Yeah. Maybe in addition, I think a different part of that conversation is also how can we strengthen our shared capacities of making that bridge between the two communities. Do we understand the language that we speak? So one of the activities this year that we did was working with the Food System Transformation e-course, where we worked with partners to have a biodiversity module in each of the different modules to immediately, when people start exploring food systems, make biodiversity part of that conversation. But also understanding that these worlds are still quite different and the language that they use are different. For me, it was a huge learning curve going to the Biodiversity Cup in Colombia last year. Really realizing that food systems, I do quite well in conversation. Biodiversity, the terminology just goes over my head and I struggle to really understand what they're saying and then also make the linkages to my own work. So in our community, we also try to build that capacity a bit between both communities of better understanding the work we're doing to also better see the linkages between them. I mean, we're definitely part of that use cases is there is already a lot going on that brings these worlds together, but at the same time, there's still a lot to learn and to strengthen in how we engage and how we build together. And I think part of that is also the plurality in the visions of the future that we all have. And that's not necessarily biodiversity or food systems, and they think differently, but everybody within this space has a different concept of what they see as a sustainable future. And it all is allowed to get space within our community, but it also needs something to then bring those stories together and to understand where do we link? Where do we find the connections in the different visions that we have or the different ways that we see that transformation going? What are the parts where we can actually still work together? Because we can contribute to those different visions. And that's kind of part of the capacity building, shared messages work that we're doing. Because one of the things we want to develop is document of shared messages, like showcasing where do we as this huge community with different visions and different backgrounds and different ideas share something. Where does it come together? And that's something that we're currently building, and we had a lot of conversations this year also with the UN Food Systems Summit. Sitting around the table and discussing what connects us. And I think if we kind of get the gist of that story, it will really help our shared engagement in whatever spaces we operate in. And those can be different. But to show that there is a lot more connection than we think there is.
And I think some things that have been surprising also in establishing the partnership and developing it further is partly sometimes the diversity of partners that have been joining, and then indeed how different people are coming from very different entry points. And then, sometimes you think, that connection is already there between food and biodiversity, but still how people think differently about it and how each have ways of working with it in practice. I think that diversity is one of the surprising things that comes out. And at the same time, then sometimes the difficulty of zooming in, zooming out across these different scales. Maybe that's a bit theoretical, but we see we have people very passionate working on a landscape scale or on a farms level. And other people working very global and looking at global models. And there is still quite a lot of distance between the language, even if they work on the same topic, and how they look at biodiversity and food, for example, and how to approach it. And I think, bringing these type of different partners together, we are all learning a lot and seeing also some of the blind spots in our own ways of thinking. We have been doing this study with PBL and Wageningen. I've been leading a study where we've been contributing to on narratives on biodiversity in food systems. And you see all these different narratives and the blind spots they have, for example, agroecology, or kind of we need to feed the world as kind of different narratives. But then you also see the blind spots, and we did a dialogue in our community, and they all professionally, they kind of arisen, or they map themselves to very different narratives. So we have people from all the different narratives, and then also the disconnect between how they map themselves professionally and how they map themselves personally, where many of them, for example, see much more connection to a more than human kind of narrative, but professionally that's still less accepted, or less, because it's much more emotional also. So it's I'm going off a little bit here, but it's just fascinating to see, I think, the diversity of how people engage with it and the learning that can be done by bringing these different narratives, different visions together. I myself also through this process have learned a lot about my own blind spots as well. Yeah. So I think if we are open for that, it's very enriching, and we see new ways for action as well.
Yeah. When you look ahead, even with all these what I would call successes, not your words, but in terms of the community, the process of building a community and making it, on these different, in all these different ways, active. What are your goals, even in just the coming year, for?
Good question. Maybe something that I'm very excited about that we're actually working on now is the development of an incubator. And it's maybe shifting the community a bit from more learning and sharing to also how can we actually facilitate change in practice and make that more tangible. Yeah. So we're in the inception development phase now, looking what this could look like, but it's an idea to set up a tool, a methodology to support partnerships and actually better understanding in a guided process how they can already in practice better integrate biodiversity and food systems within the work they're doing, making it more explicit, but also really understanding what little things can we change to already focus much more on our contribution there. Because I don't think a lot of time it's not indeed understanding that it is important, but how do you do it? And you get your funding from somewhere and that has specific goals already established, and sometimes that could be less people with empty plates on their table. And in other contexts, it might be more focused on a specific area, conservation efforts. How to bridge that within work that is already going on, how to understand what actions you can already take. And there's a huge variety of tools and information already out there, but making that accessible and working with partners, how do you unpack that? How do you operationalize that within your own practices? To me is at least a very exciting development that we're looking into, because it kind of makes that shift from working more theoretically and how we shift our minds and our hearts to better incorporate this to how do we do it in practice. And we're also moving towards how can we build on the strengths and energy in this community to also look at country-owned partnerships that can kind of flow out of this big ecosystem of partners. Like, where do we find energy to build kind of sub-partnerships, additional partnerships, a growing partnership model, where we can actually work with each other in practice to really make a change. And all those aspects are important. So the first ones will definitely be there next year as well as we grow. But it's kind of a new development.
Yeah, we got also specific demand from several members of our community to better learn and know the others that are there, because we have been growing actually quite fast as a group of, more than 150 types of organizations, very different. So people really are curious to learn much better what exactly the others are doing and how to better work together
Yeah.
across these different settings and scales.
It's interesting that they feel like people who are part of the community feel very much able to access or ask or even say like, I think we would like this, or it would be good if we did this. So it's not just a sort of one-way flow of information and activities, but I'm hearing examples throughout of, members of this community asked for this. And therefore we're doing this now.
Yeah, it's that we're definitely pioneering here as well. We don't have the answers on how to best structure that, but something that I really value is that we really want to create a space where our partners in the partnership feel shared responsibility for this partnership. And that's, hence the levels. But in essence, everybody that's a part of this can contribute in that way. And I hope that is also how the partners perceive how we set up the community. But it's a learning in progress for sure.
Yeah, which makes it also a very interesting example of a partnership, just watching where it is right now and where it was not so long ago, and where it may go in 2026, for example. Yeah, for people who may be watching and may have come through this video through various ways and now are interested for participating, becoming a part of it, what can we best, where should we send them? Or what should they do?
What should they do? Well, we have the NFP Connects webpage where the Netherlands Food Partnership presents all their partnerships and shares the key updates. There you can also find information on our guiding principles and how you can register as a member. And as I mentioned, everybody is welcome.
Yeah.
It's really this collaborative space that is inviting everybody who wants to contribute in different roles to do so.
Yeah.
And it's free.
Yeah.
So it's more your time and effort that we ask them.
Yeah. We just had World Food Day, in the context of the current date. And even there, you were very active with presenting the work, but also, I think, speaking with people and getting those opportunities to meet in person. I know we could talk about that because it was so interesting, but I'd rather ask, in the coming time, is there any more of these moments like World Food Day where people may come together either physically or online?
Maybe the first one that is top of mind because I'm quite busy in preparation. But I'll be traveling to Brazil for the Climate Cup. Be also with partners involved, hosting sessions to present the use cases and the information shared in that bundle of exciting examples. So that will definitely be promoted within the climate space as well, because we definitely talked about biodiversity and food systems, but it's a huge topic of relevance within the climate space as well.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. If we're just talking about food systems and of course the need to really do something about the food systems that we have in this world, some people say change, some people say strengthen, but we know that something has to be done because the direction that they're heading is not good for the planet, the people, and well-being. Where does biodiversity, or how does biodiversity contribute to improving our food systems, strengthening our food systems, changing our food systems?
I think part of that conversation now is that we really strive for our food systems to become more resilient to shocks, whether they are climate related or economic. And for me, and I think the members in our community as well, biodiversity is key in finding the solutions to building a more resilient food system. We cannot ensure that we have a functioning food systems without biodiversity being front and central in those conversations.
Yeah, maybe I can add to what Marielle just was saying, also that biodiversity sits everywhere in our food systems. Maybe you don't always see it, but it sits everywhere. It sits in the soils that produce our food. It sits in the habitat that surrounds our agricultural landscape. It sits in our food that we eat, and it sits in our belly when we digest our food. And we are so interconnected with that diversity in our cultures, in our identities, and how we experience it. And there is a lot of evidence that has come together if you take a systems approach that shows the role of biodiversity for these multiple dimensions of food systems, if we have food systems that don't only produce on quantity or productivity, but that focus on multiple outcomes as like resilient, including resilience, including human health, well-being, including equity, and including environmental sustainability. And that biodiversity is foundational for these multiple dimensions of it.
Maybe building on that, because I think that's exactly where NFP comes in as a convening space where all these different entry points and different types of actors can engage with each other. It's kind of a network of networks, and there's already a lot going on, but where does it really come together? And I hope that the Netherlands Food Partnership can really be seen as that convening space where all those different voices and ideas get a seat around the table, but also find a moment to come together, see where we connect and where we can accelerate each other's efforts by collaborating more strategically.
Yeah. And if you think also about the deeper systems transformation, where there are calls for this deep food systems transformation, if you look at the deep underlying causes of biodiversity loss, there are 3 big ones that are identified by the IPBES Transformative Change Assessment. One is the disconnect between people and nature. The second one is the concentration of power and wealth. And the third one is the constant prioritization of the short-term material and individual gains. And if you look at these 3 deeper underlying causes, they are also deeper underlying causes of many of the problems we have in our food systems. If you think about the inequity of the ones that produce most of the food are actually less valued and are struggling most to get a lot of good food, to get sufficient food. If you think about the disconnect that we have created in our food systems between nature and people, and kind of that kids sometimes don't know anymore where food comes from or the context around it, it has created also a disconnect of the responsibilities and etc. The third one is also, and the concentration also of power and wealth, where we also see blockages of change, where there is kind of a big concentration of power with some corporate or with some kind of institutions, where there needs to be a shift also in food systems. And the third, the constant prioritization of the short-term individual gains, where we have created certain eating habits of ultra-processed food, that we know are not benefiting us near the planet, but that are kind of feeding short-term desires and are kind of further triggered by marketing and these deeper underlying causes between biodiversity and food systems are so linked. And I think it's only through partnerships that we can address these 3 underlying deeper causes. And by creating space for equal partnerships, you can work on this concentration of power and wealth. You can create also better partnerships, working with nature also to connect further between people and nature, and creating the partnership with nature in it as well. And also, one of the things we struggle with sometimes is that kind of tension between the short term and the long term. We know we need to act, and we are acting. There are many different things that are happening in terms of action, but we also need to work on things that are long term and be a bit patient for that deeper change and the benefit that we get from investing deeper in biodiversity, because there are a lot of benefits from investing in biodiversity, but we need to build in some kind of transition phase and be a bit patient for that longer term while acting already now.
Yes. Yeah, this kind of answers something that was sort of underlying in my mind, which we don't always want to get into too deeply, but and that is, like, from the sound of it, biodiversity, everybody would recognize its value, so we would all be walking in that direction. But then you've just outlined why it actually takes work and collaboration and real effort to walk more in that direction compared to where we've been. over the decades.
Yeah. I mean, I also see it in my own family life, you know, you need to kind of struggle all these balls in the air. So you do things that you know, oh, this is, but if we can kind of work together and create a bit more space to do things that benefit us all a bit better on the longer term, then it will be a bit easier to do that.
Yeah, really well said. Yeah. It occurs to me that very often at the end of an episode, I will invite people to share a link or, you know, something where people can go and join and be part of it. But having spoken to you many times over the last few months, I know that you also have a different hope for people that may be listening, reading the content. Can you talk a little bit about that beyond just joining the community, what you hope for when it comes to those out there?
Yeah, thanks. I hope and I invite people to just take biodiversity along with them in their work, in their life, in how they think and buy food also in the shop. If you buy food in the shop, think about the diversity that you buy and the diversity that is in the story behind that food. If you work on the land, think about the biodiversity that is hidden there everywhere around you. If you walk with your kids somewhere, enjoy together with them the joy they see in all these little things, and the joy it brings to you.
But it's really like once you see biodiversity, it becomes such a part of your existence and how you look at the world and your curiosity and what's to explore around you, that I really hope that inspires others to also be more curious on that biodiversity in their life and how they in small ways can contribute to that as well.
Well, I want to thank you both for joining me for this episode of Welcome to the Beehive. I'll make sure that those links are available to everyone who may be watching this video or catching a clip. And of course, I hope we get to speak again in the future, maybe on the progress of things. And for everyone else who may be watching and you just ran into this episode, you can subscribe to Welcome to the Beehive on the podcast platform of your preference, either in video or if you like to just listen, you can do that too. And we invite you for another edition in the future. See you next time. Oh, and I've been your host, Mark Fonseca Rendeiro. Bye!